There were 16 theaters that were shut down on Broadway. It was the beginning, it was in the 70s, it was in the last recession. And it was not a very good time to be beginning and have student loans and everything to pay off. But
Meryl Streep has 3 Oscars and a reputation for being untouchable. But even a legend has a breaking point. Throughout her massive career, she's been stepped on by co-stars who mistook her kindness for weakness. Now, at 76, she's done playing nice. Streep is finally exposing the 6 actors who made her life a living hell on set. So who managed to get under her skin? And what shocking behavior landed them on her bad side? Join us as we count down the 6 actors Meryl is finally calling out. Dustin Hoffman. The legend of Meryl Streep is usually told through her 21 Oscar nominations and her crazy ability to disappear into any character, from the Iron Lady to the terrifying Miranda Priestley. There's a famous saying in Hollywood that Streep could play Batman and still be the right choice. But while her career is a masterclass in acting, her legendary status was actually built on a set that felt more like a battlefield than a creative space. The 1979 classic Kramer vs. Kramer is a cinematic masterpiece, but behind the scenes, it was a rough look at how one actor's method can become another's nightmare. When a young Meryl Streep showed up on the set, she was basically a nobody with only a few roles to her name. She was starring opposite Dustin Hoffman, a massive star at the top of his game. However, their professional relationship fell apart on only the 2nd day of filming. In a scene where their characters are fighting in a hallway, Hoffman did the unthinkable. He slapped Streep across the face in a moment that wasn't in the script. The shock on Streep's face in the final cut of the movie is painfully real. Decades later, she talked about that moment, noting that while actors usually give each other a break in physical scenes, this was different. It was my first movie, and it was my first take in my first movie, and he just slapped me, she remembered. It was crossing the line. While Hoffman has never directly talked about the slap, reports suggest he did it on purpose to get a raw, angry reaction out of her. A controversial move he was known for as a method actor. The physical hit was only the start of what seemed like a targeted plan to keep Streep off balance. Hoffman allegedly used Streep's personal tragedies to fuel her performance. Just a year before filming, Streep's longtime partner, Godfather actor John Cazale, had passed away. According to biographers, Hoffman would whisper Cazale's name in Streep's ear right before intense scenes, specifically during the big courtroom battle, just to trigger her grief. The mind games continued during the famous restaurant scene where the 2 characters argue over their son. Without warning Streep, Hoffman whispered to the camera operator to make sure the shot was wide enough to catch a specific move. He then smashed a wine glass against the wall, shattering it right next to Streep's head. The fear and surprise on her face were real, but she stayed professional. After the director yelled, "Cut!" she calmly told Hoffman, "Next time you do that, I'd appreciate you letting me know." Surprisingly, the tension on set wasn't even the first time the 2 had a bad run-in. Years earlier, while Streep was still a student auditioning for a play Hoffman was directing, she claimed he introduced himself in a very gross and disrespectful way. While some details of that story were later debated, her team confirmed that he was offensive and that Hoffman eventually apologized. When talking about the movie years later, a tearful Hoffman admitted he was in a dark place at the time, dealing with his own divorce and personal struggles. He admitted he was empty in every way, which clearly leaked into how he treated the people he worked with. Despite the toxic energy on set, Kramer vs. Kramer won 5 Oscars, with both Hoffman and Streep taking home awards. The film is still seen as the ultimate divorce drama. It successfully caught the raw, uncomfortable reality of a broken relationship, but it came at a high cost for Streep. Streep's ability to survive that trial by fire and still give a career-defining performance shows how much grit she has. It proves that while Hoffman was trying to help her act by pushing her buttons, Streep didn't need his tricks. She was already the powerhouse the world knows today. She proved that even at the start of her career, she was more than capable of outshining a veteran, no matter what dirty tactics were used against her. Today, the film stands as two things: a brilliant piece of art and a serious reminder of the thin line between acting and abuse. But while she was busy surviving the psychological warfare of one leading man, she was about to face a completely different kind of challenge with another. Jack Nicholson. While Meryl Streep is known for being a total professional, her history with Hollywood's leading men has had some explosive moments. If you thought the tension with Dustin Hoffman was bad, her history with Jack Nicholson takes the love-hate dynamic to a whole new level. The two first teamed up in 1985 for the movie Heartburn, but the partnership almost ended before it even started. Rumor has it that Meryl actually kicked Jack out of her hotel room, disgusted by his constant flirting, and famously swore she would never work with the legendary playboy ever again. But in Hollywood, never doesn't usually last long. Just 2 years later, the pair reunited for the 1987 drama Ironweed, and the vibe on set shifted from pure hatred to something much more scandalous. Despite Meryl's earlier promise, rumors began spreading like wildfire that the two had become unusually close. In his biography of Nicholson, author Mark Elliott dropped a bombshell. He claimed the two were spending so much time together in private that Jack's trailer was practically rocking on its wheels. What makes this rumor even juicier is the timing. While the cameras were rolling, Jack was reportedly balancing a messy relationship with Angelica Houston and seeing another actress on the side. Meryl, meanwhile, was already years into her marriage to sculptor Don Gummer. Both stars strictly denied having an affair at the time, but the crew on set wasn't talking about the script or the acting. They were talking about the undeniable high-voltage chemistry happening behind closed doors. To this day, Meryl and Jack remain close friends, but that "I'll never work with him again" drama remains one of the most legendary turnarounds in movie history. It seems that even the most disciplined actress in the world couldn't completely resist the famous Jack charm. Whether it was a brief moment of poor judgment or just two icons having a bit of fun, the Ironweed set remains a permanent, scandalous mark on Meryl's otherwise perfect reputation. But while her time with Jack was defined by whispered scandals and trailer-rocking rumors, her next major partnership would take her from the heights of tabloid gossip to the most harrowing depths of the human soul. Trading the playboy charm of Nicholson for the unpredictable intensity of a newcomer, Meryl was about to enter a creative partnership that required a level of raw, unfiltered passion that almost broke everyone involved. Kevin Kline. When you talk about heavy-hitting movies, few carry the emotional punch of Sophie's Choice. This was the film that turned Meryl Streep into a total legend, but it was also the big screen debut for Kevin Kline. Before a single scene was filmed, the drama was already happening behind the scenes. The director, Alan J. Pakula, was originally looking at international stars for the lead role, but Meryl Streep wanted the part, and she wouldn't take no for an answer. Legend has it, she actually threw herself on the ground, begging the director for the role. Faced with that much passion and talent, he gave in, pairing the world's top actress with the theater world newcomer, Kevin Kline. Kline was cast as Nathan, a brilliant but dangerous man whose relationship with Sophie was a toxic mix of charm and terrifying abuse. Coming from Broadway, Kline was used to months of practice and deep bonding with his co-stars. In Hollywood, the routine is usually much colder. You sit in your trailer, show up to say your lines, and go home. But the director wasn't interested in the Hollywood way. He wanted a raw, unpredictable energy between his leads. To get it, he turned the set into a private lab. He wouldn't even let the crew in until the actors had spent time making things up and working through the scenes. According to Kline, they would find their footing in private before the cameras were ever brought in. This rare freedom allowed Kline to bring a shot of danger to the role, making his character one of the most unpredictable in movie history. The result was a performance that mixed Kline's natural charm with a frightening edge. As the audience, we wanted to love him just as much as Sophie did, which made his violent outbursts feel like a physical blow. Kline found grace notes in the role that most actors wouldn't reach in a lifetime, let alone in their first movie. While Kline later became the classic American dad in hits like The Big Chill, he always looked back at Sophie's choice as the gold standard. He quickly learned that most directors just wanted him to stand on a mark and follow the camera. On this set, however, he was given the space to be a true artist. It was an elite start that set the bar impossibly high. When you start your career at the top of the mountain with Meryl Streep, everything else feels like a bit of a climb. It wasn't just a movie. It was the moment Kevin Kline realized that in the right hands, acting isn't just about the lines. It's about the struggle found in the silence between them. But as Meryl moved away from the heavy, silent struggles of the 1980s, she began to explore a lighter side of Hollywood, one that traded tragic choices for mid-life crises. Alec Baldwin. By 2009, Meryl Streep was the undisputed queen of heavy drama, but she decided to end the decade with a project that proved she could rule the box office just as easily as the Oscars. This was It's Complicated, a romantic comedy that flipped the script on the typical ex-husband story. Streep played Jane, a successful bakery owner who finds herself in a messy secret affair with her ex-husband Jake, played by Alec Baldwin. The twist? They'd been divorced for 10 years, and Jane was already being chased by a charming architect, played by Steve Martin. On the surface, Baldwin called working with Streep a dream come true, even posting old photos of them dancing. But in the world of big-budget movies, dreams can sometimes just be a polished public image. While Baldwin was at the peak of his fame on 30 Rock, rumors often flew about the friction that happens when a perfectionist like Streep shares the screen with an unpredictable personality like Baldwin. If Meryl's history with leading men has taught us anything, it's that she has very little patience for big egos. Despite any eye-rolling behind the scenes, the chemistry worked. Audiences loved the beautiful kitchens and the relatable love triangle. The movie became a massive hit, making over $219 million. For Streep, it was a victory lap. In that same year, she played a famous French chef in Julie and Julia, proving she could switch from a comedy about divorce to a biopic without breaking a sweat. This was her last big role before she played Margaret Thatcher in The Iron Lady, the part that finally ended her nearly 30-year Oscar drought. While It's Complicated earned her a Golden Globe nomination, the real takeaway was watching Streep handle the chaos of Alec Baldwin with her classic grace. Whether she truly enjoyed working with him or was just counting down the days until she could get back to more serious co-stars, she made the struggle look like pure movie gold. It remains the ultimate comfort watch, even if the reality behind the scenes was exactly what the title suggests: complicated. Brian Cox. The world of high-stakes acting is usually filled with mutual respect, but sometimes that respect is wrapped in pure jealousy. In a 2023 conversation, Succession star Brian Cox revealed a hilariously honest moment he had with Meryl Streep. He confessed that when he finally met the legend, he looked her in the eye and told her, "I never liked you." When a shocked Streep asked why, Cox simply said, "I never liked you because I was jealous." How can anybody be that good? While Brian Cox was jealous from a distance, Emily Blunt was living the slightly terrifying reality of working with Streep during The Devil Wears Prada. For that movie, Meryl decided to try method acting to stay in character as the cold, bossy Miranda Priestley. But according to Blunt, the process made Meryl absolutely miserable. Staying in that icy, mean headspace meant she couldn't join in on the fun with the rest of the cast. It created a wall between her and everyone else. While she didn't actually hate her co-stars, the role required her to act like she did, which left her feeling lonely and depressed. This led Brian Cox to give his honest take on the whole method acting debate. While he respects whatever helps an actor get through the day, he isn't a fan of the brooding approach. He famously made headlines for calling his Succession co-stars' intense process annoying. To Cox, acting is about the ability to step into a character and, more importantly, step out of it just as fast. His advice for actors who refuse to leave the character at the office? Go back to your trailer and relax. Interestingly, despite Cox's big dream to work with Meryl, the two have technically been in the same movies twice, Adaptation and Fantastic Mr. Fox, but they never actually shared any time on screen. It's a missed connection that Cox clearly feels. He sees her as one of the greatest of all time, even if her brief time as a method actor made her the most feared woman in fashion for a year. For Meryl, the experiment with being a method actor was a one-time thing. She famously hated the shadow it cast over her relationships on set. It seems that even for the greatest of all time, being slightly terrifying has its limits. As for Cox, he's still waiting for that dream collaboration, hopefully one where the method is left at the door and they can just focus on their legendary talent. But long before she was the icy Miranda Priestley, Meryl was already mastering the art of keeping her distance. A lesson a young British actor would learn the hard way while lying in a pile of insects. Jeremy Irons. In the long list of leading men who have worked with Meryl Streep, Jeremy Irons might be the only one who escaped with his dignity intact. In 2024, Irons looked back at the 1981 classic The French Lieutenant's Woman, the movie that put him on the map. But as Irons tells it, he wasn't even supposed to be there. At the time, he was a theater actor with zero star power. He was convinced the producers would hire someone famous. The director wasn't worried, though. He told Jeremy, "I don't need a star, because I've got Meryl." By 1981, Streep was already an unstoppable force. She had survived the toxic set of Kramer versus Kramer and the games of Jack Nicholson, arriving on set as the most wanted woman in Hollywood. For Irons, the experience was a masterclass, but it was also a rough introduction to how Meryl operates. While he was used to the polite, polished world of theater, Meryl was playing a different game, one that involved a lot of calculated chaos and very little warmth for her unproven co-star. Irons recalled watching Meryl work and feeling completely out of his depth. She had a habit of mumbling through the script during rehearsals, only to suddenly shine during a specific moment. To a theater actor who tried to make every take perfect, this was confusing. Meryl knew exactly how to handle the camera. She would pick and choose which parts of a scene to nail in each take, knowing the editor would stitch her brilliance together later. But it wasn't just her skill that was intimidating, it was her intensity. In one famous scene, the two actors had to lie in a pile of hay filled with bugs for an entire day. As they lay there, covered in dirt and insects, Streep turned to him and said, "When people tell you this is a cushy job, remember today." It was a classic Streep moment, professional, grounded, and noticeably cold. Throughout the shoot, the power dynamic was clear. The director had his star in Streep, and Irons was just along for the ride. There has always been a hint in Irons' stories that Meryl didn't go out of her way to make him feel like an equal. In fact, her behavior suggested a quiet lack of respect for the theater kid who hadn't proven himself on camera yet. She once taught him that the value of your job has nothing to do with how long your car is. It felt less like a friendly tip and more like a stern warning. It was as if Meryl were reminding him that he was only in the room because the director didn't think he was important enough to be a star. Despite the bug-infested misery and the shadow of Meryl's reputation, the film was a massive success. It earned 5 Oscar nominations and 11 BAFTAs. It was the movie that launched Irons into a legendary career, eventually leading to his own Oscar years later. Looking back over 40 years later, Irons clearly respects Streep as the best of her generation, but working with her was like surviving a hurricane. She was brilliant, hard-working, and perhaps a little bit terrifying. For Jeremy Irons, the lesson was clear. When you're in a movie with Meryl Streep, you either keep up or you get swept away by her indifference. What name on the list shocked you the most? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.